told me don't quit your day job, but your homework is going to be the only thing that is going to make you rich, right? And both you guys have families, and both you guys have inventions and products.
Correct.
At what point do you decide to make the inventions and the products
What you
the
do
day
now
job?
matters. Your leadership now matters, and that.
Is that God talking?
Hello?
Special.
All right, so why don't we do this? So at what point do you decide that the business is worth, investing all the time? And that means obviously a lot more risk. So either one of you guys want to take that?
I'll speak up and take it. Me personally, the decision I made is that my family is going to be a priority. I voluntarily decided to get married and have kids. So my priority needs to be around making sure my kids and my family are always first. And in the world we live in today, working for a company that can provide stability, providing a home in a good neighborhood for your kids with, health care, like I said, basically stability, for me is a priority. So when do I leave corporate America and stability to jump into entrepreneurship? And I would say it's when I can actually provide that for myself.
So that's a calculated risk, but unfortunately corporate America is throwing you out right now because they're suffering as a community. How do you secure that and are ready for that move in case, and hopefully unlikely, but it happens?
I mean, that's a
Let me ask
tough
something.
one.
If you got fired, what would you do after that? Would
If
you
I
get
got
another job, or would you dig everything into what you currently have?
Good question. First thing I'd probably do is look for another job, but I immediately would start working and doing what I have to do. I mean, if we're keeping it simple, I'd start hustling. Getting everything going. I'm not going to fail. Make sure my family stays stable.
Right.
Work in industry that I already know very well, the contacts I have, but I would definitely start working on my personal business heavier, more time and energy put into it. I'm really interested to see what some of the changes we're making as a country, how that's going to allow us as entrepreneurs to take more risk. People aren't, comfortable talking about the healthcare and healthcare being more affordable, but for an entrepreneur, it kind of excites me.
Right.
Because that may allow me to take a chance
Right.
and provide stability to my family and become one of the millionaires that they want to tax higher. Fine. If you want to, hey, tax me higher.
It hurts. It
I hear
hurts.
you. I understand.
It
I
hurts.
understand. I'm speaking in ignorance because I'm not, I'm
That's-
not wealthy.
I-
However, from my perspective, it would be a blessing for our culture, our society, to give me a chance to leverage my gifts to help something grow and come to life. And so that's kind of the
That's the
snafu.
balance. And how do you feel about that, Mike? So the question, to reiterate, the question is, at what point do you make that homework, that night job, your full-time passion, that when you get to that tipping point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely depends on where you at or at as a company, with the invention if you have it, or if you have a business or what have you. You got to look at your bottom line and say, okay, is this decision to quit my day job, quit my full-time job, is it feasible? And if it's not, you got to stick with your day job. You got to have that money coming in. For me, I look at my day job as a way to fund my entrepreneurial activities.
Well, what if a lot of entrepreneurs get to the point where they're coasting along and then after 10 years they go, all right, I'm doing X amount of business. It's either got to grow or I got to stop doing this, right?
Yep.
Because, a lot of entrepreneurs come to the point where they say, well, I'm waiting for the perfect time. And my theory is, no, you got to make time perfect.
True.
And at what point do we stop being careful and take risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole process, invention, entrepreneurship, I think the whole process is a risk. And that's probably the biggest risk. If if you take that jump and leave your day job and jump into it 100%, that's a huge risk. But that's what it takes sometimes.
Well, I don't know if it's a risk necessarily. The whole entrepreneurship and developing something could be a hobby. You know, somebody can spend that same amount of money every month going to Vegas and gambling or drinking and partying, right?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't mean, and they do that like if it was their job, right?
Right.
So how many, you know, when you take the risk and you say, well, listen, you know what, I'm putting in 1 hour every night on this project, you know, 20 days a month, and before you know it, after about 5 years, this is compounded to a full-time job almost. Yeah. Now, do I pull the trigger and get it cracking? Or do I take my time with my family and value it and stop wasting my time doing this and go on more vacations and spend more time with my daughter and my kids? I'm just trying to ask, when do you do it? Because see me, I burned all the bridges. I said, you know what? The only thing that I am never going to regret is that I never tried. And I'm going to take this 2 or 3 years and I'm going to burn everything and I'm going to do it. Do you ever get to that point?
I think you do. I think the time to get to that point, though, is when you're not, you know, you may have been in a situation where you could do that, but, you know, the way I was raised and the way I believe is that I consciously made decisions, and I can't, to me, that's selfish. I don't want to jeopardize or put my family at risk. I have a burning desire to do it, but how do, you know, that's kind of the $1 million question. How do you do it, you know, and not put someone else at risk?
And that is a big challenge. I got to be honest. You know, when food really took off, and I always, even till today, I always have a healthy paranoia that it's just such a great dream I've been living. You know, I started spending 6 months overseas in factories and everything. My wife said, I saw you more on TV than I saw you in person, and I lost my family. That's what it is, right? And most entrepreneurs do that. On the flip side, I didn't get chances, you know, to really talk to my mother much anymore. We were best friends, but mom's like this sometimes. Hey, I just saw a house in Tennessee. I went for $1 million. Just wired me the money. She has no problem no more, right? So it all depends on what the sacrifice pays off. But I want to know a little bit more about who you are as your product. So I know your product. Why don't you tell everybody the product you have? Because you're saying that about the risk and everything, but I know you made it to Shark Tank, and I know there's 25,000 applicants that make it, and we only see 90 people, and you stood up there in front of us, in front of all those sharks and millions of people, and you held your ground. And so you are seeming a little passive here, but you're an animal, and I know it, right? So why don't you tell us about your product? Okay. What is your product?
Well, first of all, thank y'all for coming out. It's a blessing to be here. I'm honored. My product is a system called Hydromax. I was an athlete. You know, I was good at what I did, but God had other plans, and I feel like Hydromax was one of them. When I was an athlete, what I noticed is that my competitiveness and my focus did not allow me to pay attention to myself sometimes. Sometimes I put myself at risk, and as I've gotten older, that's kind of the culture of athletics. You know, we want the kids to work harder, we want them to go stronger, and we're starting to see kids die. We're starting to see things happen to the extreme where, you know, scientifically we've isolated what those causes are, and some of them are just as simple as hydration. You know, so when I saw that and I noticed that, you know, I was towards the end of my career, and I used to think if I can just have an IV bag on my shoulder pads or in my shorts or somewhere to where I can have water, it would improve my performance, and it'll keep my coach from giving me a hard time because I need access to it. So I said, how do I make this happen? If MacGyver was here, what would he do? You know? So I thought about a Capri Sun with a long straw, and I thought about, okay, how do I keep it from being blown up and breaking? Ultimately, I came to the design of Hydromax, and it's a 16-ounce water bladder that mounts to the exterior shell of shoulder pads. It has a protective shell on it so it won't break. I worked with some NASA engineers to make sure the material would not get moldy. It was stretchable. It's a very, very stable product. And now kids will have access to water on the football field. The problem I'm facing right now is I'm battling a culture of a game that's been around for ages. You know, over 20 million people play this game, and water is still perceived sometimes to make you weak. So I get a lot of feedback that's positive. It's a great idea, but I'm battling people starting to pull the trigger and change the culture. If you look at the game of football right now, there's really not any process in place for when you give your kids water, how it works, when do timeouts take, how do I know when a kid is dehydrated, how do I know that my kid had a great day and everything's fine. Typically, if they don't cramp up or die, a trainer say they're hydrated, right? So when I'm trying to take my product to another place, and I'm very passionate about it because I feel like, you know what, God put this on my plate for a reason. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for the passion. I was born with it, and he put this idea on my plate, and it's my challenge as an inventor. He only gives so many people these gifts to pursue it, and the endeavors that the challenges, I should say, that I'm overcoming is going to create my story one day like Mr. John. He's here because he's a motivator to me and all of our entrepreneurs because of the challenges he had. When you hear about making his whole business start in a basement, right? And I think about some of the things I said, this guy started in a basement, he's a billionaire. I'm not in a basement. So, I'm trying to overcome some adversities and everything, but what my biggest goal is, and I'm working on a scientific research study is, double-blind study, is to prove scientifically that a child having access to water more often than they do not have access to water is going to increase their ability to perform and also save lives. So when this happens, you'll see it in news media everywhere. It's my biggest goal and dream, and I'm just going to need people to get behind the concept, because when we get behind concepts, they get refined, they get mastered, and it grows. This is just stage one. So that's my business. That's what I do. And hopefully, if y'all ever want to check out what the product is, you can go to my website. It's hydromaxsystems.com. And keep me in your prayers.
All right, so I got a couple of comments about that. I know the Hydromax system that he has, and it is ingenious. And if I don't know if you explained it correctly. I was listening, but it snaps into the shoulder pads of these kids. It can take a hit. And it has I forgot what size kidney on it, and it's like the Camelback, and it is an amazing product. Now, Chris just stood up here. He's articulate, he's spiritual. He said some words on there that I gotta go look up later, because that's just what it is, right? Handsome guy. I know that my mother was really my motivator, and I know that almost all the people I ever known who have a level of success, it was always a strong woman that motivated them. So I need to talk to your wife. I think that she needs to be like Adrian in Rocky. You know, when Rocky's all beat up, I don't want to fight Adrian, right? And Mickey was talking to her, and she just said to him, go out there, and she just said, win. And Mickey said, well, what are we waiting for? I need to talk to your wife, because she needs to push you harder. Because if you stand in front of anybody, any corporation, you will own the room. And I think that you're only about 2 years away from being that multimillionaire that you need to be. How about you, Mike? Talk to me about your product, baby.